to our second session of the day, which is about building a brand and standing out in your application. We're very lucky to have with us someone who's extremely experienced in this sector to talk to you today and answer your questions. It's Jason Connolly, who is the founder and CEO of JMC Legal Recruitment, and he's well known in the industry for helping professionals with moves. He's helped lots of law firms in the past, in particular with big partner moves and team moves. So he's extremely experienced. We're very lucky to have him, particularly because today's also his birthday. So happy birthday to Jason. So if any of you have any questions at all, pop them in the chat box and we'll try to get them answered as we go or at the end. And without further ado, pass you over to Jason.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Law Society for inviting me. Yes, it is my birthday today. In this half an hour, I want to cram in as much as I possibly can to help all of you with building your brand, getting the jobs that you want, and giving you career advice that's going to make a difference. What I would say, as Jonathan's just said, if you do have a question, get it in the chat now, and I will make sure that I get through as many as I possibly can. No question is too small. A lot of the time, it might be you're thinking something that indeed someone else is thinking about. Very briefly on my background, and then we're going to get stuck straight into it. I wasn't a lawyer. I left school. I had a very varied career. I was actually a performer doing magic for many, many years. Then I worked for Virgin Atlantic. Then I was a police officer for the Metropolitan Police, which I did for years. And I went into recruitment about a decade ago. So there's one thing I know about, which is how to transfer jobs, how to move jobs. And in my time in the legal recruitment industry, I've placed way in excess of 1,000 candidates. A lot of the work that I do these days is with top level partners in the City of London. So I really understand, especially the London market inside out, back to front. It's very rare that there's a question that I haven't heard before or a scenario that I haven't come across. So that's a brief bit about me. I started JMC 5 years ago. The mission for that was to become the best legal recruitment agency that really understands what they're doing and gives a top level of service. So we'll go straight into it, get those questions over. The CV. What happens when your CV goes to a hiring manager? The first thing that happens is your CV is only looked at, on average, for 6 seconds. Now, that might seem crazy. That's a statistic that Indeed ran a few years ago and that they published, and it's true. When we get a CV, the first thing I do is I have a really super speed, quick skim through it and decipher whether I want to read more into that CV or not. A misconception actually is in my career, I have never read a CV from the start to the very end. And because that's not necessary, it's not always necessary. So instant judgments are made on a CV. First of all, what is the purpose of a CV? A CV is a document to sell you. It serves no other purpose. The purpose of a CV is to get the conversation going or to be invited into an interview. So with that in mind, we're going to be talking about the CV and how it sells you. What a lot of common misconceptions are is, and this is where lawyers, even lawyers with a lot of PQE go wrong, is they turn the CV into a roles and responsibilities sheet. And all it does is it lists every single thing that they've done. And what it doesn't have is the story behind them. It doesn't have, it doesn't go into detail about their achievements. And what I found over the years, even working with top partners, is a lot of the time their CVs just aren't selling them as well as they should do. And I remember distinctly, I was on a call a few weeks ago with an amazing construction lawyer, and she failed to mention anything about her client base in the CV. It was all about the type of work that's serviced. So everything I'm going to talk to you about today is with the premise of you being junior, you being an NQ solicitor, you being a paralegal. How do we make you stand out, and how do we develop that brand? Just on the CV, I want to talk about the CV briefly because I think it is important, and I think that we see some weird and wonderful CVs that come through the door every single day. One of the things I'd say is, if a job isn't relevant, does it need to go on the CV? So one thing I see a lot is jobs that someone did back, I don't know, 5 years ago, where they worked in hospitality, or they might have done a job in Tesco's, or whatever it might be, all those jobs you kind of associate with university. If you're applying for a job in legal, what relevance does that job have? If it's not relevant, then why is it going on there? And I think we need to kind of think about that. And what we're going to talk about is how to make your CV stand out if you don't have a lot of experience. What you need to do with a CV is make yourself stand out from the crowd. So the first thing I would say about a CV is make sure it's clearly laid out. Calibri, font size 11, fantastic. That's what I think is a great font. And I think it looks great on a CV. You want to make sure your CV is clearly laid out. Now, please do not do tables in a CV, because it is a hiring manager and a recruiter's nightmare. Now, you might be thinking, why is a CV a nightmare? The reason a CV table is a nightmare is because it makes it really difficult for us to take that information and present it over to a hiring manager. It should just be simple. Avoid big blocks of narrative and work in bullet points. Your achievements on a CV should always be at the top. No matter what you're applying for, the achievements should be at the top of every role. Or if you've got a whole load of general achievements, get them at the top. Yeah, sorry, I just saw someone wishing me a birthday message. Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much for doing that. But yeah, achievements at the top. What really matters in a CV when you're starting out, because you're not going to have a lot of experience. The thing that really, what separates two newly qualified solicitors, in my mind, is what work have they worked on? What is the value of the work? How much client contact have they had? How much hands-on experience have they had? What internships have they done? And what business development skills have they had? What I always say to people is you should be updating your CV all the time as you go. The CV shouldn't be a document that is updated only when it comes to the end of the training contract. Keep it updated all the time as you go, because it makes your life a lot easier. What I think the thing that's become apparent, and I was listening into the last conversational session, and it seemed that every one of the lovely ladies there had a different experience at their own firms. Each experience had been different. And I think that a training contract, you've got to push and you've got to make sure that you get the experience that you need. And when we get an NQCV, someone that's had direct client contact, worked maybe not just with one partner in the department, but worked with multiple departments, perhaps has done an extended C, all these things, you've just got to think, in my mind, what is the end goal here? If you're a trainee solicitor and you want to go into corporate, you need to make sure that your corporate experience is as strong as possible, and you need to take control of your career. Don't leave your career in the hands of your line manager, because you need to be pushing for what it is that you need, and you need to be using appraisals and things like that to make sure you get your experience as strong as possible. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. You're going to do 4-seat rotation, 6 months each, but you decide early on that you want to do corporate law. Corporate law, obviously, is an area that a lot of people want to go into. There is more candidates than there are opportunities. So what I would be thinking of by the time I've got to my second seat, right, what I want to do, I've done corporate in seat 1, I need to sit back in corporate on seat 4. Because if your corporate experience was 2 years ago at the start of your training contract, 1, that's a while ago, and 2, you need to think about what it is that's going to make your CV stand out against the other candidate that's applying for a corporate position. And if you can get a double seat, that means effectively you've got double the amount of experience as the other person applying. So you need to be thinking in your mind, what is it I can do to stand out? What is it I can do to be the best? What is it that's going to make my CV look better than all the other NQs coming out? And this is the same as well for paralegals. One of the hardest things, I think, is being a paralegal and trying to get a training contract. One bit of advice I'd always give to a paralegal is always play on the practice area that you're in. So you might be in conveyancing and you might be thinking, I don't want to be in conveyancing. This isn't what I want to do. This isn't what I want to do long term. What I want is a training contract. Well, if you've got let's say 3 years of paralegal experience, what I would do with that is I would use that to your advantage and use that as your leverage into a firm. Maybe screen the firm to make sure that the training contract definitely exists, but you've got to play off the experience that you've got. And I think what a lot of candidates try to do is get the right practice area. And then by moving into the right practice area, then they try and get the training contract. If the focus is the training contract, use your experience to help leverage you. I'm going to move on past the CV. We're going to kind of come back to it in a roundabout way in a minute. But what I would advise any junior or any candidate to do is to have a 5/10-year career plan. What do I mean by that? I mean that you need to be thinking in your mind, even at a junior level, where is it I want to be in 5 years' time? And that's not to say that's not going to change. It might well change, but I would actually sketch out where is it you want to be. So let's just say, for instance, someone is 1 year PQE and in 5 years' time, they want to be highly ambitious and they want to head up a department. Well, what you can then do from saying, right, that's the end goal there in 5 years' time, I would then back plan. So I would say, right, that's what I want to be. What is the role that I need before that to get me to that? Right, okay, that's that. And then you would back plan from there. And I say to everybody, sit down and do a career plan once a year, do a full extensive one, then make sure every quarter, see how, you're kind of that's going and how the career plan is tying into the move. A lot of the time we find candidates come to us and we register hundreds of candidates a week. Candidates come to us because they want to move jobs, but a lot of the time that they're thinking about the instant move. What's the next move going to give me? Is that, is it going to give me the salary that I want? And I always say to candidates, think about the 5 to 10 year career plan. Does this next role that might be giving you, I don't know, 5,000 on top of your basic, is that going to be the best role that's going to get you to where you ultimately want to be? A lot of the time people tend to think very much about the here and now. And what I would always do is encourage people to think about where they want to be in 5 years' time and then work backwards, plan backwards and think, is this what, how I'm ultimately going to get there? One thing I want to say to you all is you are in the driving seat of your career. And sometimes people think to themselves, well, what does that mean? You need to be making sure that you are pushing for the experience that you want. If you leave your career in someone else's hands, the difficulty with that is, they're going to be managing other people. And I always find that by putting things in your own lap and putting things in control, you're then going to make sure that you get the experience that you want. You can push in appraisals and reviews to say, I want to get more experience in that. I want to get more experience in that. And that's what you've got to do in order to progress. Make sure that you are in control of your career. I'm conscious there's a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to keep going through some more very valuable points. How to get the job. Now, one thing I really like is covering letters. I really am a fan of a covering letter. Why am I a fan of a covering letter? Because a lot of people don't do covering letters. And when you get a covering letter, it stands you out from the crowd already. What is a covering letter? A covering letter is really a narrative about you, bringing you to life a bit, sort of almost giving the reader a bit of a feel for who you are as a person. So it's going to bring the CV more to life. And then you can talk about specifically why it is that you think you're a good fit for the role. And I always say to candidates, you always want to think in a value-adding mode. A lot of the time, candidates, when they're applying for jobs, they're trying to think, okay, how can I get the job? If you get yourself in a value-adding mindset. Now, what do I mean by that? So it could be, for instance, you draft this cover letter, and I would always say, make sure that the cover letter is right for the job you're applying for. And you might need to tinker it for each different role you're applying for. If you've just got a generic one, it's not going to be as effective as an individually drafted one. And what you need to think to yourself is it better to make 50 applications to firms, or is it better to do 10 applications, which are really high quality, where you've taken the time to do some research, and then the reader is going to think, wow, this is someone who's put in the effort in. But what do I mean by value adding mindset? What I mean by that is, if you can look at the firm website and come up with things that you think you like about the firm, perhaps things that you feel you could do different, things that you perhaps skills that you've got, maybe like you might be good at PR, you might be good at social media, you might be good at this. People want problem solvers. And if you're someone that can go into an interview and talk in the mindset of adding value, that really stands you out when you go out there. I interviewed someone recently for my own business, and they came in and they mentioned a few things about the functionality of our website. And straight away, that sat really well with me, because I thought, not only has this individual actually gone out there and looked at us and done their research, but they've even spotted ways in which they can add value. And if that's the type of personality they're bringing just to an interview, then, you know, what the interviewer's thinking in their mind is, what's this person actually going to be like once they work here? So always try to get into the mindset of how you're going to add value. It's about adding value. And people who get in that mindset do get further in their careers. I've covered the covering letter. It's important. I do think a covering letter also forms the basis for a very, very good interview as well, because the covering letter will be referred to. The covering letter does not need to be massive. You know, don't feel that it needs to be War and Peace, and avoid doing massive blocks of narrative. I'm going to talk now about, because I'm really conscious that I want to get onto the building the brand part here, and I'm going to whiz through some of this. Interviewing. Interviewing is very, very, very important, because you've got to make sure that you are interviewing the employer the same as the employer is interviewing you. Now, I've always spoke quite passionately about this, but how an interview kind of goes a lot of the time is down to the interviewer, because the interviewer leads the questions. And not everyone is a fantastic interviewer. A lot of partners will do interviews, but they've never had interview training. They don't necessarily know about asking open questions, how to do these things. So, you know, just, and I always say to people, don't be afraid to bring in a notepad to an interview with a list of questions on, or just points and bullet points of things you want to mention. So let's say, for instance, you've read the job spec, you've got familiar with that, you've done your research. Always also look into the people that are interviewing you. Do your research on them. And one bit of great advice I would give is, if you can find some common ground with the interviewer, for instance, you might both have attended the same university, that is something that you can build common ground of. And it's a point where you can suddenly, you know, in the interview go, oh, we both attended the same university. There you go. You're starting to build rapport. But when you go into the interview, what you need to be thinking, so I'll just take a sip of coffee. I'm on super speed here. When you go into the interview, what you basically want to be doing is the interviewer will be sitting there going, this is the job that we're currently recruiting for. And they'll have the job spec. And you need to be in the interviewer's mind, ticking off all those different points that the interviewer is thinking what they need to see for the job. So make sure you've read the job spec properly, and make sure you understand what it is that the employer is looking for, so you can make sure that you sell the right stories, the right examples. There is always this Do you know what? And I'll remember it and I'll send it to the Law Society afterwards. There's a way where you can. Oh, it's called STAR. The STAR way of answering an interview question is situation, task, action, result, and it's a great way to explain. Interviewer asks you a question. Tell me a time when you might have, I don't know, had a challenge to deal with and it hasn't gone your way. You start with the situation, then you talk about the task at hand, then you talk about the action you took, and then what was the result. The STAR way of answering questions is good because it says what was the situation, how do you deal with that, what is the action needed, and then ultimately what was it that happened off the back of what it is that you did. It's a great way to answer questions as well. I do appreciate that interviewing is like being a rabbit in headlights. Don't rush to answer questions in an interview. Take a moment to think. Don't try and fill in silences. Another thing I always say to candidates is be aware of, if you're in a role that you're not happy with, we've all been there. I'm sure loads of us have been in jobs that we're not happy with. Don't overtalk the negatives of the job that you're currently in, because what you might find is you go off on a negative tangent and 15 minutes of the conversation is being taken up about the negatives of the past. If you don't know an answer in an interview, absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. Just be honest about that. Make sure you do research the partners. That is important. And you want to sell yourself against the job spec. I always do think a really nice thing to do at the end of an interview is to actually let the people know that you want the job. Because believe it or not, sometimes we get called up by law firms asking, for instance, what is it that, were they interested in the job? Was the candidate really excited by it? Make sure that, you tell them that you're enthusiastic, tell them that you want the job, and then send a nice, well-drafted, good follow-up email at the end. By sending a good, nice follow-up email at the end, it keeps you in the partner's mind. Most candidates don't send an email to follow up directly to the partner thanking them at the end. It gets you back in the partner's mind. I'm going to whiz straight on because I do want to get to some of these questions here. Networking could not be more important. If you're not on LinkedIn, get yourself on LinkedIn immediately, because one of the first places we go to when we want to look up a candidate is we go to LinkedIn, and it's all about networking. I think networking is so important, and networking can lead to job opportunities that you might not find anywhere else. You'd be really surprised the amount of times that we place candidates in jobs without the job spec even being openly available online. I would say over 50% of hires are, if not a little bit more, are made from jobs that never existed online. So I'll give you an example. You want to get into, let's say, corporate law. Start finding events that you can go to in corporate law. There's nothing wrong with even reaching out to a partner and asking them to maybe be your mentor. Mentors are a really great thing to have. If you're a junior lawyer or someone wanted to get into the sector and you aspire to be a certain person, reach out to that person, and you'd be surprised how more often than not, people at the top want to help people. So there is nothing wrong with getting a mentor, but get yourself out there, get to events, get out there and network, because the more people you have and the bigger your network, the more that's going to help you in the future. If you're on LinkedIn, make sure your profile is strong. There was an example I saw the other day of a paralegal, and she'd honestly got a crazy amount of followers because she kept documenting her experiences of the training contract process, the applications, how she got rejected, how she got back up again, and she was getting hundreds of likes on the platform, and the amount of attention she was getting just from law firms. You can't underestimate the power of LinkedIn. It's made me, it's really helped me in my career, and I put so much time into LinkedIn. And don't wait till you've got a job to get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place to be on, because what we do, the first place we go to when we get a role is our internal database. Second place we go to when we get a role is we go to LinkedIn, and we have a tool where you've got to make sure you've got the keywords on your profile as well. Make sure your profile is well drafted. Make sure it's got all the keywords of what you specialize in, because and all the keywords for what you want to be found for as well, because it's really important that your profile it appears in recruiters' searches. I'm really conscious that I could probably talk for another hour and a half here.
I was just going to say, Jason, if you want to start looking through some questions,
sure.
And while I just say that, if I know there's a lot of questions have gone in, so if anyone doesn't get their question answered, we've got an awful lot of questions. So Jason obviously tries to answer a few. Of course, JMC Legal Recruitment has an email address, and they have a great website. And I've just gone on it and looked at the blog, and there are articles on there. I've got 42 pages of articles, and there appears to be 9 per page, and these are all about recruitment and giving you tips and things like that. So that is effectively, there's 42 pages, there's 9, so that's 378 articles, and some absolutely great advice in there, Jason, as well. It almost makes me regret having just moved, because I would love to.
Honestly, what I would, and I'll whiz through a couple of these now. Just believe in yourself, and remember that your job is to sell yourself. Think about what transferable skills you've got. Make sure you use those. Make sure you keep. Don't be afraid of failure. I think I was listening to what Holly said about failure in the last session. A mistake is only a mistake if there isn't a lesson learned from it. Don't be afraid of mistakes. I have a back catalogue. If I was to have a book of mistakes, I would have, to be honest with you, I'll have a whole bookshelf full of them up there. And that's the only way I've got to where I am. But if I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't learn. So don't be afraid of them. Use them to your advantage. Use them as a learning experience. Remember, most of you listening to this now, you're just trying to learn, and you are going to make mistakes. But let me get onto a couple of these questions now. Right, Lucy Andrews, Jason, should you reduce your CV to 1 page? I always think, and you're going to hear different things from different people, I don't think your CV should be limited to any amount of pages. If you've got relevant content and your CV is 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages long, but it's all relevant, it's not just waffle, and it serves a purpose, then 5 pages it is. It shouldn't be reduced or made to be a certain number of pages. I think it really depends on, one, what your experience is, and is what's in there relevant. Obviously, the bigger it is, the more the hiring manager's got to read. So it does need to be relevant. Right? How would one go about getting an interview and stand out in your training contract application? I have a 3rd LLB degree with 4+ years of legal experience working in chambers in Temple. So lots of real life experience. I think, first of all, you need to think about, one, what is it you want to do? What's your 5-year plan? And you want to get a training contract. It sounds like you've got good experience. The first thing I'd be doing is going and asking, well, if you're in chambers, I guess that's a bit difficult, because obviously if you wanted to go down the training contract route to be a solicitor, I would be looking, if you've got litigious experience, I'd be going to a litigation firm and trying to get in that way and getting your training contract through that way. It sounds like you're doing a bit of everything. It sounds like legal admin secretary, legal PA, legal assistant. That's good, but I think you need to think about, if you are going to go into a litigation department, you need to make sure your CV is if it's got everything that you look like a jack of all trades, that serves a purpose and looks good in some ways. But what you need to do is make sure the CV looks attractive to the employer that you're taking on. And a lot of it sometimes is about how you construct it. So maybe take all the contentious experience and then apply for paralegal roles. It sounds like you're doing a bit of everything. Have I got time for one more?
Yes, I think so. Go on, one.
Right, okay. This is an interesting one. Should you focus on soft or hard skills, achievements or experience in your covering letter? I think it really depends. I think soft skills definitely deserve a place on the covering letter, but I think really it's down to you and what you feel that your strengths are and what you feel is most relevant to the role. Soft skills are really important. If you think you're a great communicator or someone and that's one of your real strengths, you're really good at having empathy, you're really relatable, you're able to be someone that can bring out the best in people, then get it on there, and just remember, I know that we're typically British, we're very modest as a nation, we like not to oversell ourselves. The CV, it's a document to sell you. And do remember that your CV is what shapes the conversation of the interview. So normally you'll find that the hiring manager, they'll be reading off your CV the whole time. So if you've got all these amazing kind of achievements throughout it, that's going to shape a really good conversation. One question which I always advise candidates ask, it's a bit of a bold question, it's not for everyone, but if you really want the job, you've made that clear throughout the interview, you've told the interviewer that you're interested, why not ask them at the end of the interview, Mr. Hiring or Miss Hiring Manager, is there anything at this moment that is holding me back from moving forward in the process? Because then you're giving them one last opportunity to address any concerns. Yeah, and I think that's a great, because sometimes someone did it to me the other day in an interview. They said, Jason, is there anything at this stage which is holding me back from progressing? And I thought,
good question.
Quite a confident question. And, now it's made me go back with a very honest answer. But then he tackled the one little sticking point I had in my mind. So that's another great thing. So, yes, if people do have specific questions, I know that I haven't even got through 1% of them. I think really this probably could have been an hour's session. I could have just gone. And there's so much I haven't even mentioned on my own sheet. But feel free to drop me a LinkedIn message, and I will reply to you. It may take a week or two just for me to get through them all. But get in contact with me. I'm on LinkedIn, Jason Connolly. Indeed, you can always visit the JMC Legal website. There is honestly a mountain of videos. If you go onto YouTube and look up the Law Society videos I've done in the past, there is 60 minutes of me talking about every potential career thing you can imagine. Wow. And it's on YouTube. And yes, there's one thing I know about, and it's recruitment, and I want to help as many of you as I can. So thanks for having me. And it's been a delight.
That's absolutely brilliant. I didn't even realize about the YouTube. That's fantastic. What a great resource we all got there. And also happy birthday again. So thanks very much.
One more thing as well that you might be interested in. Every week I host a podcast called the Career Success Podcast. And we talk to someone who's either a self-made millionaire, someone who's done something really amazing in their career. And there's some really good lawyer episodes in there. Recently, we've done Angela Neal, big property lawyer in London. We spoke to Dan Klivner, head of corporate for Sidley Austin. We've also done Irvin David, who's known as the world's leader in contemporary and ballet dance. He does all the legal contracts behind that. And if you want to get into a niche area of law and you want to hear some stories, go over to the Career Success Podcast and look up those three. And honestly, it was there's some great advice in there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll certainly be checking that out. Right. Thanks, Jason. I'm going to tell everyone now we are having a short break until 12:15. You are welcome to have a break from your screens, or you could try out the speed networking room, which you can access by clicking the networking icon on the left-hand side of your screen. When you do this, you'll be randomly matched to have a video call with another delegate for up to 3 minutes. So it's sort of a roulette. But please make sure you come back to the main stage at 11:45 for the next session. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a lovely day.